Next on the Delaware Way, in the wake of the Parkland school shootings, we talk to Colonel Vaughn Bond, the chief of the New Castle County Police Department. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. We are still in the wake of the horrific shooting in Parkland, Florida. And after that shooting, law enforcement across the country are taking a look at what happened there to try to understand how they could do better. With me now is Colonel Vaughn Bond, who is the New Castle County Police Chief. Thank you, sir, for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm sure you've been watching, like everybody else, at what happened in Parkland, Florida. Could you explain how it works in New Castle County? Who has jurisdiction over the schools?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say that my thoughts and prayers go out to all those that are affected by this shooting down in Parkland, Florida. In New Castle County, the primary agency with jurisdiction over the high schools would be the Delaware State Police. In the majority of the high schools throughout New Castle County, Delaware State Police has school resource officers who are fully, they're Delaware State troopers that are assigned to that school.
So they're armed?
Yes, they are. They're in uniform and they are armed and they work within the school.
Which is, you try to, it would be great if all schools could do that. I mean, to have an armed police officer at a school would be a huge deterrence. I know they had an armed officer in Parkland, but I don't believe he was a law enforcement officer.
Okay, I'm not familiar with Parkland and whether or not they had
I get it. I mean,
yeah.
but in dealing with that is a deterrent.
Yes, it is. I think it's a deterrent, and it's also an opportunity for students to be able to communicate any concerns, threats that they may learn. It can be immediately reported to the school resource officer as well as the school officials.
So even though you're not directly connected, in looking at the schools in New Castle County, you think they're pretty well protected right now?
Well, there's always room for improvement. As New Castle County Police Department, we don't have any schools that we have primary jurisdiction over. So I can't speak to everything that the Delaware State Police is doing, but knowing the Delaware State Police like I do, that they are a progressive agency. They have been involved with school resource officer program for a number of years. So I'm sure that in light of the recent school shootings that have taken place, they are taking the appropriate steps to not only make sure that their officers are adequately trained, but that the staff is also trained in ways that they can improve the safety of the students.
Okay, that's great to know. Now let's expand the conversation for a second, because the Sheriff's Department locally was called by family members and by the school, and they did get involved, and they went and they talked to this kid. In the case at Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut, his mother was concerned and called local law enforcement, and they paid a visit. In many of these cases, in Virginia Tech, in Aurora, Colorado, there were psychiatrists that were worried, there were families that are worried, and they reached out to law enforcement, and in each time, law enforcement said, until he makes an actionable threat, until he commits a crime, we can't involuntarily commit him. We can't make him do anything. Is that the case here in Delaware as well?
Well, in Delaware, we look at the standard of to be able to take someone involuntarily for treatment. They have to be a threat to themselves. They have to be a threat to someone else. That threat can come by way of words. It can come by way of action. When that person has met that criteria, as a law enforcement agency, we are obligated to then take that person to get further treatment and examination. One of the things that has to be, I think that everyone has to remember, is that as law enforcement, we are not the ones who determine whether or not a person is a mentally ill subject. We merely assess the situation, assess the complaint, listen to it, and then we contact the appropriate authorities in the mental health field to deal with the problem.
But if a psychiatrist were to say to you, look, this guy's dangerous, and that doesn't happen a lot either, I understand, because psychiatrists have their own set of rules that they have to follow. But if somebody says to you, this guy is dangerous, what's your first step? You go visit them?
Well, if you're saying if a person is being told,
with firsthand knowledge about the person and says he's
then
dangerous,
the officers will go out, they will investigate it, they will conduct an investigation, they'll interview all the parties that were involved, they will try to gather any evidence that will support or corroborate the statement that was given to us by the reporting person or the person that called 911. So if this person is saying that this individual has made threats that they have a handgun and they're going to go and they're going to commit some type of heinous act and kill someone, as a police department, we will be looking into that to try to determine, okay, does this person who's affected with the mental illness, do they have access to a weapon? And if so, we need to then take the necessary steps to get that person into treatment and then also securing that firearm as part of the investigation.
One of the breakdowns in the process that you're talking about, that they talk about when they talk about Parkland, Florida, is that there were 20 visits to him, to this guy, based on calls like the one you're talking about right now. And no one took action because police departments are worried about taking action if there's not a threat and if there's not a crime committed, because then they're liable. They're liable to lawsuits. They're liable to problems because they're violating someone's civil rights, because they don't, as you said, they don't make mental health distinctions. Does the law have to change? Do you need more protection to protect us?
Well, there's always room for improvement with the laws. But I would say that the laws that we currently have that indicate very clearly that if a person is a threat to themselves or they're a threat to someone else, that we do have a right and the authority to take that person for help. And so I don't know.
And that was a Supreme Court ruling. That's where that came from.
Yes.
But the problem is that, at least from what the reports have been, the problem is that police departments are afraid to take that next step because they don't feel protected.
Well, I can't speak for that police department. I can speak for Newcastle County, and I can assure you that if a person was called in, and we deal with this quite a bit, mental health calls for service are rank up there with any other call for service that we have. On any given day, we're responding to numerous calls, and I don't have the exact number, but we're responding to numerous calls for service for people who are dealing with mental health issues. As a result of our numbers of calls for service, we have increased our training. We have now officers who are CIT trained, which is the intervention team that we have to deal with people who have mental illness. So these officers are actually receiving additional training to help us to be able to de-escalate situations, for us to recognize when people are going through a mental health crisis, and it also exposes our officers to additional resources that they wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to learn about. So we put this training on in conjunction with NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Dr. Joshua Thomas here in Wilmington, Delaware, played a critical role in getting that. So we've been doing that now for the last couple of years, making sure that we get the officers the additional training that they need. We've also increased the amount of training that officers receive in the police academy as a result. And again, the whole focus is to be able to identify individuals who are suffering from mental illness and then take the appropriate steps, and also getting them in front of the appropriate personnel so that they can get help. We also started this year through the initiative that was brought up by one of my officers, Officer Nick Hurst, who's a veteran. We've also seen an increase in veterans who have come back, who have had a difficult time transitioning over from the military. And some of them have gone through some problems. So we teamed up along with Wilmington Police Department and the Delaware State Police Department to offer training, and we call it a Veterans Response Team. And so when we have calls for service that go out involving veterans who maybe experience some mental crisis, having a difficult time, we try to make sure we send those officers who receive this training to that. And many of those officers are former military personnel themselves. So they're able to go to that situation, introduce themselves to that person, and basically talk the same language that a person who was in the military.
It sounds like you're well prepared for any problems with mental health. I would never ask you if you would have handled the situation differently, because I know better, because you're not going to criticize another department without knowing all the facts. But it seems like you are well prepared for a situation like that one in Newcastle County. When we continue our conversation with Colonel Vaughn Bond, Newcastle County Police Chief, when the Delaware Way continues.